In the Gaming Homer course, we're going to be paying a lot more attention to the armor and to the weapons under the heading of gear, which is the next unit for Gaming Homer. But it's important to note that just as in the Iliad and also the Odyssey, the idea of gear being very important is one that the bard exploits to great effect. In video games, adventure video games, what a hero is wearing and what the hero is fighting with have huge importance for the storytelling, for what it means to be that hero and the way that the player is thinking about that hero and what that hero can do and also what the hero can't do. The same way that Patroclus can't use the spear of Achilles because he's not valorous enough, he's not strong enough yet. Which is what happens in role-playing games when you're not allowed to don a certain piece of armor or not allowed to use a certain weapon because you haven't attained the level, which of course goes back to what we were saying about Diomedes and my hero Coronel from Lord of the Rings Online, the way that he levels, and leveling is an essential part of becoming the excellent hero that hopefully you're going to be someday. That, of course, doesn't happen for Patroclus because at the end of Book 16 we have his tragic end and the famous exchange of words between him and Hector. This is Hector talking to Patroclus. Patroclus, you thought perhaps of devastating our city, of stripping from the Trojan women the day of their liberty, and dragging them off in ships to the beloved land of your fathers. Fool! When in front of them the running horses of Hector strained with their swift feet into the fighting, and I with my own spear and conspicuous among the fighting Trojans, I who beat from them the day of necessity. For you here the vultures shall eat you, wretch. Achilles, great as he was, could do nothing to help you. When he stayed behind and you went, he must have said much to you. Patroclus, lord of horses, see that you do not come back to me in the hollow ships, until you have torn in blood the tunic of man-slaughtering Hector about his chest. In some such manner he spoke to you and persuaded the fool's heart in you. And now, dying, you answered him, O rider Patroclus. Now is your time for big words, Hector. Yours is the victory given by Cronos' son Zeus and Apollo, who have subdued me easily, since they themselves stripped the arms from my shoulders. Even though 20 such as you had come in against me, they would all have been broken beneath my spear and have perished. No, deadly destiny with the son of Leto has killed me, and of men it was Euphorbus. You are only my third slayer. And put away in your heart this other thing that I tell you. You yourself are not one who shall live long, but now already death and powerful destiny are standing beside you, to go down under the hands of Iapis' great son, Achilles. So the most important thing here is the way that Patroclus sees into the future and at the same time advises Hector about Hector's boasting. Now we know Hector as a very honorable man who is nevertheless, and we see this in Book 6, which we'll talk about down the road in the unit on ethical critique, we see that he is bounded by the heroic code and really doesn't know any more than that, which is in a certain sense what makes him a tragic figure. Well, Patroclus here is another tragic figure because he sees his end, and he doesn't begrudge, he says, the boasting of Hector, and he says, yours is the victory, but Hector, you need to think about this. You need to think about what the meaning of that victory is. And this is, again, the shading into the questioning of what excellence actually is, what Aristeia actually means. And that, in turn, will allow us to look at Odyssey 22 to figure out what it is that's going on with Odysseus with regard to that ethical critique and the questioning of Aristeia. And then beyond that, to wonder whether that is something that's going on in video games. And I'm going to suggest that it is, but perhaps in a sort of unexpected way. In the 22nd book of the Odyssey, Odysseus has his own version of an Aristeia, but the setup is very interesting and very different, and it casts the Aristeia of the Iliad in a very interesting light, because before the Aristeia happens, Odysseus has been disguised as a beggar, not looking like a warrior at all, and the suitors expect nothing from him. They give him the bow to string as a joke, the bow which is to decide the contest of who is going to get to marry Penelope. He strings it, he throws off his rags, and this is what happens. Now resourceful Odysseus stripped his rags from him and sprang up atop the great threshold, holding his bow and the quiver filled with arrows, and scattered out the swift shafts before him on the ground next his feet, and spoke his word to the suitors. Here is a task that has been achieved without any deception. Now I shall shoot at another mark, one that no man yet has struck, if I can hit it and Apollo grants me the glory. He spoke and steered a bitter arrow against Antinous. Antinous is one of the two chiefs of the suitors. He dies in short order, and then very quickly Eurymachus, the other chief of the suitors, dies in pretty much the same way. And here's how Antinous dies. But Odysseus, aiming at this man, struck him in the throat with an arrow, and clean through the soft part of the neck the point was driven. He slumped away to one side, and out of his stricken hand fell the goblet, and up and through his nostrils there burst a thick jet of mortal blood. And with a thrust of his foot he kicked back the table from him, so that all the good food was scattered on the ground, the bread and baked meats together. But all the suitors clamored about the house when they saw that the man was fallen. Now, I want to point out the very strong irony here, and perhaps irony is the overarching thematic point that I want to make about this Aristeia. First of all, there's the irony of Odysseus saying this is a deed that was achieved without any deception, because of course he has used his métier, his job more or less, his deception to get to the point where he is. And now all of a sudden he's claiming he's doing it without deception. Is he joking? It's very hard to say. The other huge irony, which runs all the way through this book, this Aristeia of Odysseus, is the way that instead of falling to the ground of Troy and biting the dust and having your armor clatter around you, in this Aristeia, when people die, the food clatters around them. And on the one hand, this points to the incredible weakness of the suitors, the way they're not heroes who went to Troy like Odysseus. But on the other hand, and this is going to be hugely important as we move to the Gaming Homer unit of anti-heroism, and also hugely important for the unit for both courses, Ethical Critique, which is coming up. The question of whether Odysseus really is the right kind of hero is very much, I think, at the fore of what the bards are singing about. And I think the bards feel like they don't have to decide. They're just having a lot of fun, as, for example, a player playing Grand Theft Auto 4 has a lot of fun going back and forth between being a good guy and being a bad guy and seeing how it feels. And that, in turn, is going to get us very far, both with Ethical Critique and with Community and Polis, when we think about the people in especially 5th century BCE Athens, those are the 400s BCE, and 4th century, the 300s BCE, people like Plato and Aristotle, thinking about what it means to pretend to be bad people and pretend to be good people, and what sorts of restrictions we should put on that. And in turn, that's going to help us reflect on what's going on in our own culture, and also reflect that back on to how we understand what's going on both in 800 BCE with the Iliad and the Odyssey, and in 400 BCE with Plato and Aristotle.